You started a career path and have been grinding away, maybe all the way to the top. But you've decided the career you've dedicated your life to isn't the career you want to dedicate your life to. Now is just the beginning. Starting out or starting fresh. It's time to become the work experience kid. Have you ever been told that you have a nice voice? Or maybe you just have the desire to talk on the radio? Well, this episode's for you. We're speaking with professional voiceover artist Matt Dawson. I also want to know if I have the skills to do that as a job. Slight asterisk. I have done some voiceovers in the past, never super professionally, and I even did the voiceover for the podcast. Maybe there's some sort of Dunning-Kruger situation where I think I'm better than I actually am. Anyway, let's see what skills you need to become a voiceover artist with Matt Dawson. If I can quickly squeeze in to mention my book, Let's Not Be a Dick Today. Matt Dawson actually did this. He bought a copy of the book for somebody else. When you buy it directly from me, opposed to on Amazon, I'll sign it for you. Or you can let me know that you're buying it for somebody else, potentially a dick in your life, and I can write a little message in there for you. There's a little ad for Let's Not Be a Dick Today at workexperiencekid.com. Or you can Google it. If you don't want to do the personalized thing, you can buy it off Amazon as well. Let's not be a dick today. And to start, Matt, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I work as a voiceover artist. So I voice things like radio, TV commercials, messages on a whole, corporate videos, and more.
Cool. And how long have you been doing this?
It's been 22 years now. I was just thinking about that before we jumped on this chat. And yeah, I started way back in 2003 at radio school. So a very long time ago now, and I feel very old.
22 years in an industry, that's a whole lot of experience. Did you always want to be a voiceover guy?
Sort of. So I actually wanted to be a radio announcer. That was what I thought I wanted to do when I was growing up, which is very similar. So I remember being a young kid, 8 or 9, playing with Matchbox cards in my room. My mum would have the radio on downstairs. I'm from Newcastle, so the station was NXFM, and I just remember listening to all the announcers talking in between the songs, and then they get to play a bit of music, and then they get to do an interview with someone. And I just, even at that age, I just remember thinking how much fun that career would be. And I remember shortly after that, my grandpa was really sick in hospital. And what I did is I made him a radio station where I just recorded songs and me talking in between the songs, talking about the music and that kind of stuff. It was way back in the 90s. So I was, recording onto a cassette tape. And yeah, I made him about 4 different tapes. The poor bugger probably sounded terrible back at that age. But yeah, so I sent him those, and that's kind of where it all began, I guess. It's kind of grown from there.
It sounds very similar story to Ed Calishaw, who was the first guest on the pod who was a radio announcer, just liking the appeal of radio, but then finally got themselves into it. It's very similar. Also, Mandy Turner got into radio in a very similar way, so there's a common theme here. So it sounds like you wanted to be a radio announcer when you grew up. There was no ifs, buts, or maybes.
No, there wasn't. And when I finished year 6 in primary school, there was a booklet that came out where all the students had to answer questions about, what they liked about school, what they didn't. And one of the questions was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I only found this book back at my parents' house in the back of a cupboard last Christmas. I took it out, and yeah, the question was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I had put radio announcer. So I think not a lot of people have that sort of progression. They might think that that's what they want to do at that age, and then they end up doing something completely different. But I knew from a really young age that that's what I wanted to do, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to get it.
And then did you get into radio?
So when I was around 16 or 17, I was flicking through the local paper and I saw an ad for a community radio station, Lake Macquarie FM. I'd heard of it, and they were seeking volunteers. So I called them up and I just told them a bit about myself, said that I was really looking to get into the industry and I'd love to volunteer for them. And they invited me to come take a look at the studio, and they gave me a shift on air pretty much straight away, which was kind of a little bit daunting, but they kind of helped me through it. And I just ran a request show basically where I was just playing music and talking in between songs about the artists. Sometimes they'd have some prizes to give away, so listeners would call up with prizes, and that's kind of how I learnt a lot of the skills that I could then use in the future. It's kind of where it all began. So yeah, it was fun actually. And in high school, a lot of people were listening from school, and it just sort of really took off from there. And that's just kind of made me fall in love with it even more.
That's really cool. So, this is a question I usually ask a little bit later, but since we're in the area, what is your career progression from that community radio spot through to now?
When I finished school, I decided that I would try to get into the Australian Film, Television and Radio School. So they do a radio course. You get a diploma in commercial radio broadcasting, but it is really hard to get into because there's only 12 spots a year. Well, there was back when I did it in 2003. So I applied and I got an audition where you go in and you sit with the producer and you record some stuff. They have some scripts to read. Then you have an interview with a panel. So it was all kind of daunting and I wanted it so badly. And funny story is that I actually originally got rejected and I thought, oh no, like, what am I going to do now? Because I just finished school. I didn't want to do anything else. And I guess I put everything on to getting into this course and I didn't get into it. So I'm like, okay, I'll just get a job in retail until I figure this out. So I got a job at Big W and I'd only been there for about a week when I got a phone call saying, hey, just letting you know, someone's actually dropped out of the course and you're next on the list. So if you're ready to move to Sydney, then we'd love to have you. So that was that. I started in the radio course. And honestly, they just teach you everything about radio, and it's so in depth and it's so interesting. You learn everything from sales to promotions to voiceovers to on-air work, absolutely everything. And you're also hearing from people in the industry that already work in the industry and been really, really successful. So at the time, it was people like Amanda Keller, American Rosso were really big at the time. And we had guest lecturers from voiceover artists. So there's one in particular, Jo Vaness. She came and lectured our class. And I was so interested when she spoke to us because she has had such a great career as a voiceover artist. And she gave us some scripts to practice and she gave us all feedback. And that's kind of when I first had my taste of voiceovers on their own, sort of separate to radio.
That was afters radio school, and then your first job out?
So when you do the afters course, you're pretty much guaranteed a job at the end of it because it's so highly regarded in the industry. And you also do a work placement. So every single person at the end of the course only goes for a year. And towards the end of it, you do 2 weeks work placement. And it could be anywhere. You could, be on Nova in Sydney. You could be in Brisbane, Melbourne. You just don't know. I ended up being sent to CFM in Toowoomba. And the job that I was actually appointed to there was as a copywriter, but also working as an announcer on the weekend with a pre-recorded shift. So at the time I was like, oh, I'm not sure like if that's necessarily what I want to do, but I thought, you know what, I'll go there, I'll give it a go. So I was writing commercials Monday to Friday, recording my shift for a weekend. And after the 2 weeks was over, they actually offered me a job.
Oh,
And I
wow.
was just, yeah. So I was blown away. Like, I was like, hell yes, like, where do I sign? So then I'm moving to Toowoomba at 19 years old, starting a whole new career in a town I knew no one. So it was kind of daunting.
I bet it was. I did a very similar thing, except for I moved to Nowra in New South Wales at 18. I get it. Wait, was I 18? Yeah, I was 18. Anyway, it's about you, not
Just a
me.
baby.
Yeah. Okay, so you got to Toowoomba. Could you maybe churn through subsequent jobs that you've gone on to?
Yeah, so I spent a year in Toowoomba and yeah, copywriting Monday to Friday. Then on a Friday, I would record my shift on the weekend. But the listeners didn't know that it wasn't going out live, so I had to fake a lot of the phone calls with my friends. They'd be ringing up requesting songs, or I'd be getting them to do some crazy thing on air. So I would just change their names each week. It was bloody funny. And then, so after a year there, I saw a job come up in Brisbane with Southern Cross Austereo at B105 and Triple M. The job was as a radio copywriter, so doing the same thing, writing commercials like I was doing in Toowoomba. It didn't have the on-air element, so I wasn't quite sure if, it was the right move for me, but, to get to a cap city radio at just 20 years of age, I thought I need to take this and just sort of see where it lands. So I started working at B105 and Triple M in Brisbane. writing commercials. And I also, it was from there that I started also voicing a lot of the commercials. Often if they needed a young male voice, I was right there. So they'd grab me, and it started off only being a couple of lines here and there in commercials. But within, a few months, I was voicing full commercials for them. And I found that I really, really enjoyed that. Probably even more so than writing the commercials. I just loved getting behind the microphone, bringing a script to life, working with the producer. And I think that's probably the key moment where I switched from going, you know what, maybe I don't want to be a radio DJ, a radio announcer anymore. Maybe I'd actually prefer to be a voiceover artist. So in that job, that would have been when I first realized that that's what I wanted to do.
Cool. So this is very similar experience to me. I moved from Nowra, New South Wales to Darwin, then from Darwin back to Melbourne, where I was working at Fox and Triple M as a writer. So very similar there. And I was doing voiceover commercials because, I was at that age, 21 or something. Similar, where I had the young male voice going on, especially for like universities or something. Again, similar to you, just a couple of lines here and there. Oh shit, it's 4:00 on a Friday and this ad needs to be on air tomorrow. Who's around? You are.
Yep.
But that's sort of where
I know that one.
Yeah. And I've made some good money that way too, thankfully for deadlines. But that's sort of where my voiceover career has stopped. I feel like you have more of a career though to share with us.
So from there, I started to take voiceovers a lot more seriously, and I started to really focus on it and just try to perfect every read that I could. I was constantly making demos and sending it to colleagues and just saying, look, how is this? How is the sound? Like, am I sounding okay? Could you suggest any feedback? And I feel like people in the industry are always so supportive of each other. I've always found that, especially in the radio industry. So the feedback I was getting was really positive. I was having lots to work on and just honing my craft. I did my research as well, and I found out who the biggest voiceover agencies were. So the ones in Australia, probably the top tier, you've got RMK, you've got Scout. It wasn't Scout at the time. It was called Kathy Evans Voice Management, and you've got EM Voices. Because I was also working as a radio copywriter at the time, I also was in the interesting situation where I was also booking voices, and you would have been in this position too. So I already had those connections at the big agencies because I was already using them and, talking to the people there. So I then sent my demo to Scout, which was Kathy Evans Voice Management at the time, and just, sort of to get their feedback on whether or not they thought that I might be a good match to be on their website, to be one of their voiceovers. And a few days later, they replied asking me if I wanted to join their books. So
Amazing.
I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, so I wasn't expecting anything like that. I was maybe expecting a bit of feedback, or our books are full, maybe try in a year or two. But yeah, so obviously I was absolutely over the moon, and that's kind of where it all started for me.
So you did all of this without a qualification to do it. I mean, you had the radio school, which gave you the exposure and the experience there, and I guess it's all tied up in that qualification you get at the end of it. But you don't need a qualification to be a voiceover guy.
No, you don't. I could have just skipped all of school, I just all I needed to do was learn how to talk clearly.
If it's that easy, why don't we all do it?
That's exactly right. So I can still remember in maths class, my teacher would get angry at me for talking, and he said to me one day, Matt, you know what? Like, talking's not going to get you anywhere in life, my friends. But I certainly showed him, because that's exactly what I do. I talk. So
you've given him a big old middle finger.
That's it. I dedicate every single commercial to him. I always think of him, Yeah, so I was still working as a copywriter, and I loved that too. It was great. And there were two things that kind of worked hand in hand. Because I got to work with voiceover artists, and I also got to be a voiceover artist myself. So at the time, the Brisbane market wasn't thriving for voiceovers. A lot of the bigger jobs come from Sydney and Melbourne. I still got a few, great clients while I was up there. I was voicing TV commercials for Subway. I believe I was voicing for, I think it was Jetstar. There was a few others, clients that were coming through Brisbane, but I knew that if I wanted to get further with the voiceover career, I did need to move to either Sydney or Melbourne. Being from Newcastle myself, I decided that I would try Sydney because I'm more familiar with it. I'd lived there before. So I took a real risk, and I left my job as a radio copywriter, and I decided I'm going to try and do voiceovers full time in Sydney. So that was a pretty big move for me and kind of scary, but I felt like, it's the time's now. So it's now or never. Let's do it.
And did that risk pay off?
Yeah, It did pay off. It took a little while to get going though, and I had to take a job outside of radio just because there was no radio jobs available at the time. So while I was kind of out there networking, getting my demo out there to different companies and different agencies, I got a job as a content editor for Booking.com. So writing up the hotel descriptions for Booking.com. Took another job at a company called Kudo, which is similar to Groupon. So, all these vouchers you can buy and that kind of stuff. So I was sort of doing that on the side whilst trying to sort of build up my voiceover career. And then as time passed, I sort of landed more gigs. I started booking jobs. I ended up scoring a fantastic client, which I've still got to this day, which kind of kicked it all off for me, which is Transport for New South Wales. So they are responsible for a lot of the commercials you see on air for speeding, drink driving, don't text and drive, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So that was probably the biggest client that I landed, probably within 6 months of being in Sydney. And I was, voicing their commercials for television, radio, cinema, just everything.
Awesome.
And yeah, so that's kind of what kicked it off. And it kind of just sort of grew from there. And I just sort of kept on getting more clients. And yeah, so that was how it all started in Sydney.
Is this a common pathway that voiceover artists follow?
I think starting off in community radio is definitely a common pathway. I think I got a little bit lucky by also working as a radio copywriter, meaning that I had connections with all the different agencies because I was booking their voices already. So that kind of gave me an in. It can be a little hard at first if you don't know anyone in the industry to break in. So I don't think mine was necessarily common. I think a lot of it was, look, yes, a lot of it was hard work, but there was also some luck involved with the contacts that I was already making. But I think, community radio is probably definitely where a lot of people start. And then they just try and find their way, just contacting people directly or making demos. But until you actually get that break, it can be really tough to sort of get your foot in the door. But once you are in the door, then you're set for life, basically.
It's definitely like a high risk, potentially high reward industry. That must be a very hard one to be working in.
Absolutely. You often need to have a full-time job as well while you're doing it. Otherwise, it's just too risky.
Yeah, I bet. And obviously you had to juggle the start with some other work as well. It seems like an industry where it's such irregular work, irregular hours, irregular money. There's obviously some down points to that. What do you love about the industry? You've been doing it for so many years. You fell in love with it quite early on. What keeps bringing you back into the studio?
I think it's a number of things. I think one of them, it's just the variety of work you get to do as a voiceover artist. There's no 2 days are the same. So, one day I might be voicing a serious road safety ad for Transport for New South Wales in the morning, then a hard sale commercial for a tile sale, or then I might be narrating a corporate video. So no 2 days are the same. And you're working with different people every day as well, because you're working with different clients, different producers, you're going to different studios. So I like the variety of it. It's not boring. It's never dull. It's just every day, just completely different.
Okay, and you're traveling to different studios. So, well, I know the answer to this, but anyone listening may or may not know. Correct me if I'm wrong or tell me how it works. So you get a call from your agent, say, hey, Matt, you're going to be at this particular recording studio in this suburb at 9 o'clock. And then maybe, let's say you have a busy day, then at 11 o'clock, you're going to cross the other side of town, go into a different studio. And then 1 o'clock, you're going to go to a radio station, record some commercials there. And then, you got maybe 4 hours break. And then what does that work out to be, like 3 or 4 o'clock that afternoon? You have to go somewhere else?
Yep, that's exactly right. It can be full on, and sometimes there are days when you have back-to-back schedules and you're jumping from studio to studio, trying to beat traffic, making sure you're on time. So yeah, it can get a little bit crazy. But in saying that, there are also times when it's really quiet, and that often has nothing to do with you. It's just how the industry might go. So it ebbs and flows. So there's times when you might have a day where you don't get any jobs, and you just have to be able to sit with that and just, trust in the process and trust in your ability and trust in the connections you made to kind of get you through that period, because it does always pick up. The range is different. Every single week is different. I could be back to back all week, or I could just be doing nothing. And it's scary, but hey, showbiz, baby.
Yeah. Okay. And like, to add to that, both of us have worked as writers in a radio station and hiring voiceovers. And there's been times when I've had, let's say, a female voiceover say, hey, I was getting a whole lot of work from you for, the past, say, 3 months. all of a sudden it's dried up. What's going on? And my answer is,
Yeah,
or has been, I'm getting all of these commercials that I need men for. And
exactly.
I want to get you on. Let's say they have a nice mum voice, right? And that mum's probably not going to be able to sell power tools too well. And so you go, I'm just doing power tool ads. I'd love to get you on them, but we probably should
Yeah.
find somebody who's more suitable. You and I both know that, there can be dry patches for voiceover artists, but, just for extra context for anyone listening who hasn't been in the business. Do you have any standout memories from your voiceover career?
Oh, that's a good question. I think voicing the commercials for Transport for New South Wales and landing that client has been definitely a highlight for me. And I think I like the fact that it challenges me as well because they're quite serious messages. So, probably 80% of the work I do is probably retail. So, sale, 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 at blah, blah, blah. So it's just nice to jump in and do something different that's a little bit more meaningful. Not that tile sales aren't meaningful, but just talking about drink driving, trying to keep people safe on the roads and that kind of thing. So that's probably a standout for me.
I've seen some of that work that you've done for Transport New South Wales, and yeah, that is definitely in an area that is way different to a tile retail commercial. So I can see how you might have to have a bit of range, and that might challenge you a little bit more because that's in an area that you generally don't talk in.
That's exactly right. It's very different, and not everyone can portray empathy with their voice. It takes a bit of practice, and it's one of those ones where you really need to nail it because if you don't, it sounds insincere, and the commercial just isn't going to work. The client's not going to be happy. So yeah, that's probably one thing that you need to think about when you're voicing something like that. I think another standout moment was one time when I was voicing a commercial and I had to be someone talking over the loudspeaker in an airport, and they were putting effects behind my voice so it sounded a little bit muffled. But what I was saying wasn't coming out clearly, obviously because it was muffled through a speaker. Anyway, the direction I got was, can you maybe sound like you're mumbling articulately? I'm like, right, okay. I think that was probably the most interesting feedback that I'd ever had before, and the most interesting direction. I'm like, okay, we can give that a crack. So I think it's just funny moments like that. Or, you probably had this one too as a writer. Can you sound like you're talking slower but go faster?
I totally know that one because, especially as a writer, sometimes you accidentally write something that is going to come in longer than 30 seconds, as you say, 33 seconds. You kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. You go, when a writer says, can you read it faster but say it slower? It's kind of like shorten the amount of gappage between each word, but I want you to say each word at a slower length. So hopefully by doing so, we can get that 33-second ad into 30 seconds. It rarely works.
That's exactly right.
You and I know this, Matt, but a lot of voiceover artists, the really good ones, understand that's what you're trying to ask for. But there's a lot of complaining, especially on LinkedIn, with voiceover artists who don't actually understand what's going on there. But it's just a different way of direction. And really, it's our fault as writers for writing a long script. Just real quickly,
Yeah,
I can
exactly.
actually, with my little thingo here, I can maybe sound like what you were trying to sound. I'm actually going to sound like maybe a megaphone. I'm going to sound like I'm on a megaphone right now. So, Matt,
Oh,
when you were saying that you're becoming a bit muffled, it's because you had an effect like this on, or an effect like this on. So you're never going to sound super duper clear. That's something that should be added in production and not or by the audio engineer.
but sometimes you just get to a session and you just got to go with what they want. That's all part of it as well. Just going with the flow. You got to be pretty flexible. You got to be able to take direction, and sometimes you might have to do the same line multiple times, and you got to be really patient to deal with that. And sometimes you might get frustrated and think that you're not doing a good job, but mostly it's just that the client has something either very specific in their mind of how they want it to sound when they're trying to portray that to you, or sometimes they don't even know what exactly they want. So they're trying to get you to do a lot of different takes just to sort of maybe work out which one they want to choose and which tone they want to go with. So that's something in the studio you've got to keep in mind as well. Just, taking the direction and just being really patient with it and keeping you cool and just going with it.
I know that sometimes the voiceover artist nails it on the first take, and there are some people who seem to be paid by the hour or something, and they're like, we can't leave on one take. Let's get some more, and they make you work for the entire of the hour-long session or however long it needs to be. We've gone from some standout memories in the studio. Do you have a spectacular failure you can share?
So it was actually for a session for Subway, and it was really bad because the line that I had to say over and over again was 6 inch sub, and I kept screwing it up. 6 inch sub. It was just, I don't know why, but every single time I just could not get the words out clearly. It was just one of those days, and sometimes that happens. A word will pop up that you keep stumbling on, and the more you think about the word, the more you're going to get it wrong because if you're thinking about it too much. It was rough because, obviously I was so happy to get the booking for Subway, great client, great national brand. And here I am, can't even say 6 inch sub, but look, what are you going to do? It happens. And we got there in the end and the commercial was made. It was a success. So, I feel like you always get there in the end, but that was just one where I'm like, oh, this is not my best work.
Was that early on in that Subway contract, or had you done a few and you just had a bad day?
Luckily, I'd done a few, so they knew that I was just having an off morning. We had a laugh about it, but obviously, at the time, I was like, "Oh God, this is not a good look. Not my best work."
And you're worried that you're going to lose the next job and everything from there on.
Yep, absolutely right.
We spoke about how irregular the work can be. Is there anything you don't like about the voiceover industry?
The worst thing about being a voiceover artist is when you get a cold. In most professions, you can just pop some Codral and soldier on, but most of the time, you literally can't work for a period of time when you've got a cold and you lose so much money. And especially around COVID, everyone was getting sick. Oh my goodness. And also on top of that, colds and flu season. So you got to factor that into it as well when the work ebbs and flows, because when you have a cold, it is really hard to just power through and your voice has to be perfect. It has to be in perfect condition if a client is paying lots of money to book you and to have your voice on their brand. So you can't just wing it. You really do have to cancel. And I think the funniest thing was during COVID, I actually got booked to voice some COVID ads, and then I couldn't go to the session because I got COVID. So
Ah,
I know. So yeah, so that's probably that's something that you don't really think about, but yeah, when you're a voiceover and you just start feeling that twinge in the back of your throat, you're like, oh no. And then you look at the bookings you've got for that week and you're like, there's TV ads in there, there's cinema, there's radio.
and you get paid more for TV and cinema as well. So you see those bookings come up and you go, oh, I'd love that money.
Exactly. And I think all voiceover artists, we joke that whenever we get sick, it will always be the same week that we have back-to-back bookings with some really big brand names, maybe some auditions. But look, it's all part of it. You just have to accept it. You can't change it. And you just hope that they're casting for Codral, cold and flu or something, and you'll just be able to voice one of those commercials. But
Yeah.
it's a bit of a bugger, but you just move on, I guess.
So far, you've told us a lot about your experience in the voiceover industry. I wouldn't mind mentioning the guest tab at workexperiencekit.com. Every guest on the pod so far has volunteered their time, and I'm really grateful for that. So as a thank you, if you like what they do and want to work with them, go to workexperiencekit.com, find the guest tab, and find the person that you want to work with, and you'll be able to contact them through there. In Matt Dawson's case, you can go to Scout Management's website. You can Google that, or it's linked through workexperiencekit.com, the guest tab, find Matt Dawson's name, click through there. I want to know if I could get into the voiceover industry properly. So, Matt, could you tell us what a regular day or maybe week looks like for you? We've spoken about how work ebbs and flows, but what might it look like?
Some weeks I'm flat out and have lots of bookings. The next week might be quieter, but I'll give you an example of a day I had last week. At 9 a.m., I got an email from my agent. She's forwarded me the weekly Bunnings specials, which I go into my studio and voice. So I do that, providing a number of different takes. Then I edit the audio. So things like cutting out the mistakes, removing the breaths, making sure I've said it all word perfect. Then I'll send the files to the client via my agent. This took about an hour. 10 a.m., I had a client who provided me with the wrong pronunciation of a suburb name in Melbourne. And this happens sometimes. Sometimes there's lots of different ways that people say it themselves as well. So I jump back in the studio and revoice that one and send it back. Then I had a booking at midday to voice a new TV commercial for Transport for New South Wales about speeding. To the studio called We Love Jam, which is a fantastic space for recording. I love working with this team, and both the client and agency are sitting and directing me. This took about an hour. Come home, have some lunch, and a script has landed for 4-wheel drive Super Centre. It's for their end of financial year sales, so I voice these. They're often quite long, so I have to go very fast, like we were talking about before, but it kind of works and it makes it sound more urgent. Then the agent called to tell me I have an audition to be the voice for a petrol station in their upcoming TV commercial. So I voiced a few lines of that, sent it back to my agent, crossing my fingers. So that was a day from last week, but sometimes it's busier than this, sometimes it's quieter. But yeah.
The petrol station voice could be interesting. Obviously, you don't want to tell me too much about that right now, but I passed the petrol station the other day and it had a logo of a sort of like a water droplet, but it's petrol, so it didn't look like a water droplet. It looked a bit meaner. And then it was holding a petrol Bowser nozzle, and then its eyes were slightly red, like it had been in the fumes for too long. So I'm just sort of imagining what this guy's voice might be. Hopefully that will be you.
Oh, that would be amazing. Cross your fingers for me.
Not saying that you chrome petrol, but I'm sure you have the skills to make it sound like you do.
Oh, I can do. Oh, absolutely.
All right, so you had a busy day last week. To help anyone looking to get into the voiceover industry, what skills do you need to have as a voiceover artist?
Obviously, you've got to have a great voice. You've got to have the ability to understand tone and flow and pace. You've got to have the ability to be able to interpret a script on a page and take direction from a client without getting overwhelmed or frustrated. You also need to be really patient because some sessions can be long. You can get some confusing feedback as well, and you're trying to interpret that. And you might have a number of people watching you, so you also have to be quite calm and cool under pressure. And also, a big one is you also need to be punctual and respect other people's time. Oftentimes, these studios are booked back to back, the client's booked back to back. So that's a key one for me, and I think for most voiceovers in the industry, because you've got to respect everyone else's time as well. It's valuable. It's also about your brand. You want to protect your brand. You don't want to be known as that voiceover who is always late, because you know what? You won't get booked anymore.
Day to day, you're working with your agent, maybe an audio producer, maybe the client, potentially other voiceover artists. Anyone else I'm missing on that list?
Yeah, so yeah, there's producers in the studio. They're the ones that are pressing all the buttons, and honestly, the way they work is incredible. They're doing a million different things at once, pressing this button so they can talk to me, making sure it's turned off when they start to record so nothing else is coming through the microphone. Also, yeah, clients, other voice talent as well. It's always a treat when you get booked with another voiceover artist and you might be getting to be in the booth with them, maybe having a conversation. That's definitely a highlight. We all love that. It just makes it more fun and interesting, and we get to socialize and with our peers and kind of ask them about what they've been up to lately, how work's been going, that kind of thing. I think that's about it.
This might be a very timely question. Do you think your job or the voiceover industry has a strong future?
Yeah, look, it does have a future. However, AI is already here, and some companies are already using AI voices, which is a little scary. So I think this career will still exist in the future, but the reality is that at some point, voiceover artists may need to clone their voice to be able to keep up with the technology. But there'll always be a need for real voices, as it's harder for AI to be able to deliver empathy, emotion, subtlety, that kind of thing. So perhaps it will be a combination of an AI voice of you being used on some of the lower touch jobs, like maybe a car sale for a radio station. But for the more complex stuff, I think the human element will always be needed. So I think it's going to be really interesting to sort of see where this profession actually goes and how deep it goes with AI. So yes, it's a little bit scary, but it's also kind of exciting as well, I guess. The benefit of this could be that I could be a 70-year-old man and say I've cloned my voice at 40, which I am now. I can still get booked and cast on jobs as a 40-year-old, and then as a 50-year-old, as a 60-year-old. So I think it's strange to think about. And at first, the concept of having my voice cloned was absolutely terrifying. And I think it's the same for all different voiceover artists because, it's our moneymaker. We've worked so hard to get to the top of the industry. And now the robots are here and we're kind of all a little bit scared, but there will still be a human element needed and the money might just be made in a different way. Maybe I won't have to do anything. Maybe I'll just clone my voice and it'll just get used on all these commercials and I'll get paid and I won't have to do a single thing. So
the major thing is that you get to control your voice opposed to selling it to a company. Because that's where the danger is, isn't it?
That's where the danger is. That's exactly right. So I'm actually in a group. We're all voiceovers, most Australian voiceovers. We've joined forces. It's called the Australian Association of Voiceover Artists. And we're just trying to protect our voice because there's a lot of things going on that are unethical. There was even no law saying that we actually owned the rights to our own voice, which is terrifying. And also, a number of our voices were used to train AI without our knowledge. So, this group are incredible. They work tirelessly to make sure that we do actually have ownership of our voice and how it's used and where it's used and how often it's used. Because without that, then there's no rules, and the industry would eventually just be full of cowboys. It wouldn't exist anymore in the way it does now. So we've all worked too hard in our careers to let that happen.
And I've just seen a country, I want to say Scandinavian ish, that have just passed a law, well, maybe a little while ago now, passed a law that Denmark, you can own your own voice, you own your own, I guess, image. Because apparently, as you're saying, there's no law that you get to control your own voice or where that goes and your appearance and likeness. So I assume we'll see a lot more of that. And it's good to see that the group that you're part of is active in that respect.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it just gives us authority over our own voice. Also, YouTube have recently announced that users are unable to profit through AI voices on their platform, only real voices, which is amazing. So that's a really good thing that they've done. Amazon, unfortunately, they've revealed that for Audible, they will be using AI voices going forward, which is a bit of a blow to the industry, but it's, what can we do? That's just the battle that we're fighting at the moment. And it's just a very interesting time and nothing that we've ever experienced before. I don't think
Sure.
any of us ever dreamed it would get to this point so quickly.
Yeah, true. Well, I guess that's everywhere across every industry and the impact that AI is having.
Mm.
Have you received any valuable advice?
Ooh, I think one thing in particular in voiceovers is you just don't take it personally if a client decides to use a new voice instead of you. Because 99% of the time, it's not about you. It's just that they want to give the brand a freshen up, or perhaps the target demographic changes. It's just showbiz, and you just have to roll with it and have a thick skin and just trust yourself. Also, your brand is everything, so that sort of touches on what I was saying before about always being punctual, always being respectful, always being kind. That's probably the most valuable advice I would have.
I've got one story that might relate to what you're saying here. I was once working on a commercial campaign for a massive company in Australia. Everyone knows the name, I won't mention it. They had this one voiceover guy, he was great. He was organising a trip away to, say, Europe, and he was like, all right, I'm going to go away. I really want this work. I really want to keep doing it. I'm going to take my recording equipment with me overseas. So he paid an extra luggage allowance, took all of his stuff over with him. And overnight, like, he's in the air and that job gets pulled from him. He's not doing it anymore. And he got so angry. He sent emails back and forth. He was very emotional. And it was just like, I understand you're emotional, but that's not a decision that I made. And so I totally get where you're coming from there.
You just can't be like that in that industry because word will spread quite quickly. And another client will be looking to change their voice. And if you've had that emotional outburst, you literally won't be considered. So you've really got to be careful about your brand at all times. It's crucial and it's nothing more important.
Yeah, and I never hired him again. So that makes
Yeah,
sense.
exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, there's a lot of choice, isn't there? There's a lot of voiceovers out there.
If you were starting again, would you do anything differently?
Maybe not overthink it so much. Unfortunately, it's part of my characteristics. I'm just an anxious person. So maybe when I, at the start, had just given myself a bit more grace and been like, you know what, Matt, you're just learning. So be more kind to yourself. You're not going to nail everything the first go every time. And if it takes a few takes, it takes a few takes. But at the start, I was just way too hard on myself and it was getting in my own head.
That's a good one to keep in mind. You can't compare yourself to other people. You, as a writer in a radio station, you're working with some amazing professionals. You're not professional at this point, and you're in your head that you need to be as good as them, and they've got 10, 20 years experience on you. So it's a good reminder that you shouldn't compare yourself with other people, especially when skills and experience is involved. Is there a question that you might ask somebody, for example, me, who wants to become a voiceover artist to see if they should become one?
I think because there's so much that you need to do, there's so much hard work that you need to do behind the scenes to make it happen, to make a great demo, to make those contacts with the right people, that you can't be in it 50% or 60% or 70%. You need to be in it 110% because it is a hard industry with a lot of different voice talent out there. So you have to really want it and you have to work really hard. So that would be my question. Are you prepared to do the work? And are you prepared to put the hours in? behind the microphone, because it's not something that's just a hobby. It's, it will turn into a career if you work hard enough.
All right, well, this is a good opportunity to bring up a challenge from me. For the trial episode, I want to see if I have what it takes to become a voiceover guy. Is there a challenge that you could set me for this trial episode?
Oh, what about if you made your very own voice demo?
Okay, I think I can do that. I've got a nice microphone that will hopefully help me there. I've got some editing skills that could help me put it all together. What does a good job look like?
Well, a good demo would probably have a mix of a lot of different styles of voice. So you might chuck in an ad about a sale at a car yard, a hard sell commercial, maybe something a little bit more emotive, maybe voice something for a charity, something that sort of shows that softer side to your voice. And look, if you're confident, you could try a character or an accent. I mean, it's not essential, but if you do a good Donald Trump or you can sound like a goose, at it.
I can do this, a SpongeBob laugh.
I like that. Add that for sure.
And then I have Nickelodeon on my ass suing me.
Yeah. Exactly. I think it's probably just a case of showing your range, everything from hard sell, soft sell, maybe some corporate narration, just a variety of stuff.
I'll take that on board, and let's see how I go in the next episode. We can see how I've gone. If I have a voiceover demo, that might be able to get me some work.
Yeah, perfect. Let's do it. I'll hook you up.
And I'm totally going to hold you to that. See how I go in the trial episode, which will be published directly after this one in your feed. So make sure you subscribe, give the pod a 5-star rating as well, because that would be awesome. If you want to contribute to the pod, ask some questions, hit up the website, workexperiencekid.com.